Good afternoon. Glad that you've chosen to spend some time studying the Bible with us today. Today we're in Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 through 13. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. So we proceed into the creation week. This is Tuesday of that week, and God is still at work. He's doing a lot of different kinds of things, and one thing that's going on, the first thing that's going on is he separates water from dry land. In other words, he creates the oceans and the landmass. Okay, one landmass, a bunch of them like we have now. Well, it doesn't say, but we can assume either way. I don't know that it matters, but let's say it's Pangea. It's one big land mass. There is some evidence that that is the way things were. Even people that don't hold to scriptures will agree with that. But no matter. Think about how that might have come about. If there was water over everything, and then God's going to separate the water from the earth. Well, if you have a pan with water in it, you can't somehow put your hand in there and scoop the water over and bunch it up. To separate the water from the earth, you'd have to raise the earth up and lower it in places, and the water would go where gravity would take it. And so probably that's what was going on there, that God made the formation of the solid material to rise in places and lower in other places, and that would create the difference between the landmass and the seas. Now, we will come to this in weeks to come, but when we talk about Noah and the flood, well, there are people who discount the fact that this is a worldwide flood because how in the world there's not enough water anywhere to cover, Mount Everest, for example. Possibly true, but if Mount Everest isn't that high at that point, things change a lot. And so it could be that would be sort of a reversing of what was going on here, where he just sort of levels things out again and the waters rise. But no matter, the important thing is that God did create a separation between the water and the sea, or the water and the land, because he's preparing the earth for his ultimate creation, which is people. Then we see that on this day also, God created plants. And think about what it says, that how he created them. When he created the different kinds of plants, he created them as seed-bearing plants. In other words, they had seed then. He says he created fruit trees bearing fruit. So these are plants that he created already with the ability to recreate themselves. We'll talk in a moment about how what happens when they recreate themselves. But for now, just think about this. He creates them. He doesn't create an apple seed. He creates an apple tree bearing fruit. So if this is day 3, you walk up on day 4 and you see an apple tree with fruit on it, how old do you think it is? I mean, by our standards today, we would say that tree is many years old because they don't bear fruit for a long time. But no, it'd only be a day old. I mean, if you turned a corner and there you came upon God creating this tree. Could be moments old, and yet it looks to be years old. That'll be an important factor going forward when we consider the age of the earth and how God could create all these things. Then we see that these grasses, the plants, the trees, they were made to create, to reproduce after their own kind. And this is also a very important thing. They reproduce after their kind. The tree did not reproduce something else. The apple tree did not reproduce and suddenly become a pear tree, or it didn't reproduce and suddenly become a watermelon, or it didn't reproduce and suddenly become an Ent, like you read about in Lord of the Rings, this sort of living tree that can move and walk and talk. No, it reproduced after its kind. So whatever you see there, that's what the next one's going to be. And this is an important factor when we consider all of the reproduction of all of the kinds of creatures and things that God makes. They're going to reproduce after their kind. They're not constantly changing. Some people look at, like Darwin wanted to look at all the different kinds of finches and say, this is obvious now what happened. There was one bird thing that came along, and then all these finches came along, and it proves evolution. It proves macroevolution. Well, it doesn't. It proves that birds will make more birds. And sometimes the birds vary. You could have a Chihuahua and you can have a Great Dane. They're both dogs. And breeders have come up with a lot of different kinds of dogs, but they're always dogs. They're not, some form of cat. And so they reproduce after their kind. All of these things lead us to a conclusion that if we come to the Scripture, especially this first chapter of Genesis and the second chapter, if we come to the Scriptures already convinced that God is a limited God and cannot do just anything he wants, then we are going to interpret what we read there in a very different way than if we come to the Scriptures with verse 1, Genesis 1:1, firmly in mind, in the beginning God, and we agree that God is God, we are not. He can do anything that he chooses to do, and he can do those things in the ways he chooses to do them. If I believe that God could create by word from nothing, well, then I'm going to read the first couple of chapters, and it's not going to be a real challenge to my thinking to say, okay, well, this is how it happened. I can accept what it says there. But if I think that God is a limited creature, if I think that God had to have taken millions and millions of years because, well, of course, he's not that powerful, well, then I'm going to look at it completely differently. Well, I hope you're having a great day, making a plans for being in church tomorrow, and I will see you again next week. God bless.